Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for your timely address of these challenges for Europe and transatlantic security. It's really great and a privilege to introduce our next panelist, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, Kaja Kallas. It's so good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Please give her an applause. I think I will start with you, and I have my phone on so people can send in questions if they want. Kallas, the Prime Minister talked about we are in the midst of a transition in the international system. Mark Carney called it a rupture. How do you see it? Transition or a rupture?
Yeah. Well, I think I totally share what Jonas was saying, that every international big crisis is also, basis for developing international system further. If you think we had the League of Nations, then we had the Second World War, so it didn't work really. So United Nations was created. But now, as we heard, United Nations definitely is not delivering the way it should. I mean, if I go around the world, then I see that really there are a lot of countries that want the rules-based order because the majority of countries in the world are medium-sized or small countries. So for them, international order is really the thing that protects them. But if it doesn't work, then, it doesn't give you the coverage. There's an argument that actually, the international rules-based order has been an illusion. It has been always law of the jungle, wherever who has the might takes what they want. But even in jungle, you have animals cooperating.
Yep.
And I really see that we are in this situation where we have to really develop this international law further with those countries who want the rules-based order. And what is really lacking, because all of us want that there wouldn't be any wars. So what is lacking is the UN Charter is very good. I mean, the principles there are very good, but it lacks the accountability part, really. What happens if you breach those rules? So we have the Security Council at the moment, but, we have seen if a Security Council member attacks another country totally in breach of the UN Charter, then you can't really do anything. And I echo what you said. Also, it doesn't reflect the current world. So there's a lot of what we can build on, and I think we also need to use this opportunity to build further, because, like I say, the majority of countries in the world actually want the rules-based order.
Stoere, what we are witnessing, is it in a way driven by political personalities, or is it deeper structural changes in the overall global governance or method of governance?
Well, I think this is a typical question you get at university when you study international relations. Yeah. I remember when I studied this was a classical issue: how much does personal relations matter?
Yeah.
And then you may say again, that interests rule, really. But personalities also matter in the terms that, on the one hand, they may drive change, they become something new, and they become also the illustration of change. And I think that what we see now, for example, in the personalities of the president of Russia, is of course encapsulating much more than his own personality, but it's a part of the way an authoritarian rule, which has deep roots, is developing further. But it is also, I think, to a large degree driven by that personality's preferences and also endurance, because authoritarian leaders tend to endure, and then they put their print on the time to a large extent. So one of the characterizations of this world where you have large powers who put aside rules and promote further, it is the leader who is really, the embodiment of this change. Same with Donald Trump. I mean, I think the speech we heard in Davos, if you read it and if you listen to it, is also so much him and the MAGA movement. And you have to kind of extract how much of this is really US and how much is his exposure. And same with the president of China, you know, and other personalities. But deep down, I think it comes from interests and from the power they possess.
Yeah, historical change. Yeah. It's rooted in some more basic trends.
But yes, I just wanted to add that actually, if we look at the transatlantic policy, or we look at what the U.S. administration has, you know, the decisions that they have taken. I mean, it didn't really start with President Trump. I think, you know, there's a lot of convergence with the policies of different administrations, really. So I don't think it's because it might be also easy to think that, you know, one personality comes, there are elections, then another one. But I think it's a long-term policy that we really need to look at. And one thing that I wanted to also say is that you said that the big part of U.S. knows that we are Europe is their allies, and I saw a poll that was done in October, and that was interesting because really over 40% of Americans consider Europe their biggest ally that they can trust. Now the question to the Europeans, and that was in October. That was 14%. I think since October we have seen a lot happening, so I think it might be even lower. And now on the European side, when looking at America. And this is a problem, definitely.
Exactly. Before I'm leaving the personalities, it's a saying that all politics is local. These days, it seems like all international politics are personal. You're SMSing, you're using social media platforms to intervene with other state leaders. Is it so? And could you reflect a little bit on what kind of new dynamism this creates in international diplomacy, that you are on the phone with state leaders almost daily? I think it's a new thing in international politics. The institutions is in a way as big platform being, I don't know, ignored.
Well, I guess that all the officials around us are actually quite concerned that we are on the phone all the time or texting between each other, and they know nothing about this. So, but at the same time, I think, you know, it really brings us closer that we are able to do this, and I think the times are really, really rapid. Like everything is happening so quickly that we also need to have the tools to, you know, contact really quickly with the ones that we are like-minded, and of course also reach out to those who think differently.
But think about it. I mean, there are many I see here in this whole experts of history. But I mean, not too long ago, the main communication was a visit.
Yeah.
So when there was a visit by a state leader or a foreign minister, that's when you had the communication. So institutions are just 10,000 times too slow. You can't do it that way. And I think it's just a matter of logic that we use every opportunity to communicate, and things happen so fast. So take, for example, when you had this Board of Peace coming up, that Saturday morning, and Espen and I, the foreign minister, you know, we were on the phone before 8 o'clock to say we have to, you know, ask our legal experts to look at this. Before 10 o'clock, there were, I think, about 10 colleagues who had, you know, connected to say, let's look at this together. And during the day, we had an analysis. You cannot wait until next week and, you know, convene a meeting. It's just too late. And of course, for Kaja to run 27, you know, I think she's is my big hero being courageous, and he has to reach unanimity in addition.
Yeah. And if you go 100 years back, I think all the states leaders were around Queen Victoria's dinner table.
Yeah.
So, history is in a way repeating itself. Kallas, as the High Representative of Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, you have, as far as I know, 3 mandates: defending Europe, securing the neighborhood, and building partnerships. Can you specify a bit more on what that means for European security and a partner like Norway?
Yes. Well, I think in the world that we are right now, we really need to build up our own defenses, and that's why part of my work is really to try to bring member states together to do things on defense together, also with our partners, because so far, on the European level, we have the ministers of justice meeting all the time, and they already think European, whereas the defense ministers have always been like, national budgets, national decision making, and of course it's a competence of the member states. Nobody's taking that away, but thinking that member states are too small to do it alone. If we do it together, we can actually cover a bigger area. Take air defense, for example. Doing it together, it's expensive. So we have 9 capability areas that we are developing really in collaboration with NATO. So 23 members of EU are also members of NATO. You have the capability targets there, but how can we actually, European defense industry contribute and work together in order to reach that? Now, when it comes to building partnerships, then it is really what I said before. Whether you go to Asia or Latin America, then really there's a lot of looking at our way in Europe that, if you do this, we come with you. Or like, we want to be behind you because we want to build partnerships with you. Because, being predictable, that has been maybe, because we are a bit, like President Macron said, too slow, for sure. But it has become our strength in terms of being predictable and stable ally. So really partners are looking at us. And of course, we also want to diversify our portfolios. We have learned the hard way that, having dependencies, whether it's on energy, whether it's on security, having dependencies is making you vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, you're weak. And that's why really building partnerships is key. And of course, Norway, we sort of consider also a part of Europe, and that's why very close ally. We have a security and defense partnership, and in terms of economic security as well, the cooperation that we can do in this front. And when it comes to maritime security, I think also developing international rules further that they would, be applicable today, because we didn't have critical undersea infrastructure before, we didn't have weaponization of trade routes before, so I think there's a lot where we can cooperate and not putting all the eggs in one basket anymore.
I have another question to you directly here from Karsten Friis. Kubelius has called for a new European Security Council comprised of the major powers of Europe to provide security leadership. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we already have a defense council. I'm not really, maybe I come from a private practice, and having been prime minister, I'm really, thinking in terms of implementation. It's not about, the meetings. We have the defense council, which is the meeting of defense ministers. We have the European Council, that is meeting of leaders. So we have a lot of meetings. Now, the question is how to really make these things actually work in practice. Whether it's capability coalitions that we have built or other parts. So I don't think we need more institutions. We just need to implement the plans we already have.
And you also said last week, I think, that a EU force separate from NATO was inconceivable.
No, I said that was Secretary General of NATO who said that. But what I said is that you know, those who say that we need a European army. And maybe, you know, those people haven't really thought this through practically, because having been a prime minister, you know that you have one army, you have one defense budget. So if you are already part of NATO, and then you can't, you know, create a separate army, you know, besides the army that you already have. Because in terms of crisis, what is the most important is the chain of command. Who gives orders to whom? And if you have, like, the European army and then you have the NATO, then, you know, the ball just falls between the chairs, and this is extremely, extremely dangerous. That's why I say we have to strengthen European defense, which is also part of NATO. It is really complementary to NATO. Let's not throw NATO out of the window.
Stoere, you said that, you talked about the Euro-NATO. That we have to strengthen the European pillar or the European group in NATO who has to deliver more. Is this the answer on a European...
I think it's exactly what Kaja is saying, and exactly. You know, speaking from her experience. And I think actually those proposals that the European Union should be about defense and command structure is doing a lot of damage to the debate, because it's not the road we should travel. No. Take that away. And I think, you know, security in Europe now, if you think about it very pragmatically, you know, with the UK outside the EU, but still a major military power with nuclear weapons and, you know, its capabilities. Norway, you know, not to be shy, lying there in the north looking after security. We have to break through this, you know, and get that into pragmatism. NATO is there with a decision-making process among allies, which is in itself complex, but it is trained to work. And as I said in my intervention, I think, you know, we will see a deepening of perspectives and purpose of the northern European countries, which is natural. And I can understand that, you know, for Giorgia Meloni in Italy, with her outlook, she has a different regional outlook around her. And she will have to deepen that also with countries close to her because of geography. And we will have to do something close to geography up north. So, you know, Espen and I, when we were in government 20 years ago, we took this initiative of saying, let's bring NATO home. Because at that time, the kind of impression was that NATO commanders knew more about the mountains in Afghanistan than about the fjords of Norway. Yeah. And basically, I think that has... You know, with history's many turns and tragedies, it has in a way succeeded that there is a focus now on defending the core territories. So I think, you know, we have a good point of departure to this. I'll just come back to my point. When we now invest in defense to 3.5% and 5%, let us do that wisely. Because if we do it side by side, it will be waste. If we do it coordinated, it can be a formidable force of deterrence.
Exactly.
NATO threatens nobody, but nobody should be under the impression that they can threaten us.
And NATO has one very valuable thing, and that's standardization of the forces. And I think that's very important also for the Europeans, because to have 178 different weapon systems is not going to bring us further.
But there is also one request that we have as the European Union to NATO to share those standards, like and information, because we can't help to our member states to develop those capabilities or do them together if we don't know everything that we need to know in this regard. And there, I think the 23 members that are members of both organizations have a particular responsibility.
Yeah. And how do you see what kind of measures can be taken to improve the relationship between the EU and NATO in the years to come? Because I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, no, the relationship between EU and NATO is very good. I mean, we are in constant contact, but the thing is that what is the NATO, all the members need to agree, sharing, some of the information that is, problematic for some members. If we think about, Turkey and we think about some European Union members, so we need to overcome those obstacles because we really need to have sharing of these things so we can help both organizations really.
But think about it, what has changed. I mean, a few years ago, NATO and the EU could not talk together.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it was blocked. And I think it was during Jens Stoltenberg's term that, the Secretary General of NATO could meet with the President of the European Council and you can go to each other's meetings. So there's a major progress done. So here I think, we have to be pragmatic. I think NATO really depends on European defense industry, coordinating, integrating, getting standards right, put away red tape, develop further. And let us now, again, not rule out the strong collaboration still with the United States. And I think, the thinking that, that they will leave all of this and not see it as their interest will not be the case.
Yeah.
And, we come from the NATO summit last year in The Hague, I think with a significant unity of purpose that it is in our interest to protect.
I read your defense minister in Aftenposten a couple of days ago. He said that we have been free riders on American security for many years. And I think, but what can we do with an ally like Donald Trump, who questions NATO's willingness to defend the US, but he sends 4,000 American troops to Norway this winter to exercise on Arctic warfare, and in fact of defending us in our geography? How should Norway respond to the different signals coming from DC these days?
Well, we sent per capita probably among the most to defend the US after 9/11. So, I mean, that debate we can take on different horizons. And I think, we will welcome those troops from the US at the cold response. It is very important for Norway's defense, but also Sweden and Finland and down to the Baltic Sea and our neighbors. But again, we don't go do collective security out of charity. There is a mutual thing here.
Yeah.
But again, we have to, as politicians, to read what we see. I think what we hear from Trump when he does those kind of messages is the MAGA movement prime headlines. And that speech in Davos, I think, was a testimony to that. But we hear also the US speak with other messages of a different kind of nature. But obviously, I told Kaja this morning, as a former chief of staff of the World Health Organization 25 years ago, when I saw that picture last week of the US flag being taken down in front of the WHO building in Geneva, I thought, this is also very bad.
Yeah.
For security, because there's going to be a new pandemic, there's going to be new global health threats, and the idea that the US will defend the US mainland against health threats by pulling out of that cooperation is very, very serious. So, in understanding modern security, we have to get weapons right, and industries right, and command structures right, but these elements will still be absolutely fundamental, how we do cooperation on that, on trade, on health, and on new technologies.
You are going from here to Tromsø, and the Arctic is moving higher up on the global security agenda, Kallas. How does the EU view its role in an increasingly strategic and contested Arctic region?
We have an Arctic strategy that is a bit outdated. So we have agreed to do a new Arctic strategy because it's not only about environmental issues, but it's all about also about security and what comes with it. So we are working on this. We want to work together with our Nordic partners when it comes to the security of the Arctic and also defending it in terms of economic security perspective. So definitely I can't say what's going to be in that strategy because it's still a work in progress, but we are in contact with our partners like Norway to have the input so that we have it right.
Stoere?
Yeah, and we look forward to that. And I can remember when we defined the High North as our priority in foreign policy in 2005, and we developed the Arctic policy. We had close cooperation with the EU of their first Arctic strategy in 2008, I believe. At that time, the critical element to really anchor was that the law of the sea applies in the Arctic.
Yeah.
Because many people said the Arctic is terra nullus. You know, if we get up there, there are no rules. So we had, and I reminded my Danish friends and also American friends that a declaration signed in 2008 at Greenland, at Ilulissat, stating that basically the rule of the law of the sea applies. And although the US has not ratified the Convention of the Law of the Sea, since Ronald Reagan, they have respected it, said that it applies. So that is one important area. So there are economic zones, there is rights and obligation of coastal states. Then we have developed cooperation in the Arctic with Russia for many years. Now Russia is out of the Arctic Council, and that is taking cooperation down. But the other Arctic states have to continue to work on environment, on transport, on energy, on minerals. And just one point on security in the Arctic. I think that now we have focus on Greenland. And this completely false assertion that there are Russian and Chinese ships circulating Greenland all the time. It seems not to be the case. But we should, based on the principle that NATO should be relevant for all parts of NATO. And obviously Greenland is and will become an important part, strategically important. But we must not make the big mistake to say that the biggest challenge for security in the Arctic now is in and around Greenland. It still is the concentration of nuclear arms close to us with a link down to the Baltic Sea. That is where the major challenge lies. So we will take active part in this, and as we've always said with the European Union, sharing information and see how we can contribute. And one thing, I said to Kaja, there is this idea in the EU that there will be moratorium against importing energy from the Arctic. Well, I think that should be reconsidered, because all of the LNG the EU is receiving from Norway comes from the Arctic. Yeah. If that were to stop tomorrow because of a moratorium, it could go somewhere else. I think that would be a shame.
One question over Slido here from one anonymous questioner to the Prime Minister. Regarding the New World Order and the defense of Europe, do you consider the need to establish a Nordic nuclear deterrence?
No, there I think again, if you think about the ambition of the Nordics and Scandinavians after 1945, they had ambitions in defense, in currency, in market, and on all of those areas it proved that it had to be either European or Euro-Atlantic. So for security it had to be Euro-Atlantic with NATO. With markets it ended up to be a European market, either the internal market membership or EEA. On currency, for some countries it is the euro, for the bulk of countries. And the only area where we really moved ahead as Nordics was on passport-free travel, very important in the 1950s already. But I think there will be a discussion among Europeans, and should be a discussions about the nuclear deterrent. But it has to be European, and inside the logic of NATO. But obviously, we have a NATO strategy which is very clear, that the nuclear is a prime deterrent. But it is not Nordic. It is NATO and European.
If I may add to this, this is also the sign of our times, that that we have this thinking when it comes to a lot of countries in the world, that whether we need a nuclear weapon, which is very dangerous development, because so far, it was the non-proliferation, and it was in everybody's interest, really. But now, and it started with Russia's war, because then a lot of countries saw that actually threatening with the nuclear weapon works. You get to walk away with what you want.
Yeah.
and okay, so there's a thinking, you know, all those countries who have appetite for their neighbors' territories is like, okay, we should have a nuclear weapon because then we get what we want. And all those countries who are afraid of their neighbors think that, you know, this is the only thing that works, so we should have a nuclear weapon. And I think, you know, in terms of the world order, this is a very dangerous development.
Exactly. Time is running. I would like to end with the main security threat in Europe. That's Ukraine. It's Russia's war against Ukraine. It's going into its 5th year this February. What is the path forward for the European Union to support Ukraine, and what role can Europe play in the future of some kind of peace process? I think that so far we have been very reactive to what's coming out of Washington. Should we be more in taking an initiative? It's a terrible war. We have to end it.
Well, we had this discussion in the morning as well. Now, the problem is that what we see right now is that, you know, there has been a lot of push on Ukrainians to make very difficult concessions, which they are willing to do because they really want this war to stop. Now, this is blurring the picture from where the problem actually lies. If you think, you know, last 100 years, Russia has attacked at least 19 countries, some as many as 3 or 4 times. None of those countries has ever attacked Russia. So the question is how we make sure that this war does not continue or go anywhere else. So we need to see concessions on the Russian side, on limitations on their military budget, on their army, all these things, or nuclear weapons. Yep. So that to take this threat really away, plus the accountability for the crimes that they have committed. Now, there's no talk about this. Now, of course, the Russians see that why should they talk to the Europeans if, you know, talking to the Americans is delivering them the maximalist demands that they haven't even conquered militarily. So if we say that, you know, you should talk to us because we want you to make concessions, I mean, why should they? So I think, you know, in the peace process, we have a very clear role because what we have seen is that, you know, you can agree whatever, but if Europe is not agreeing to this, you need Europe on board because then it also works. We need to think about the life after as well. We were discussing before, and really to you know, what is our approach right now is that we need to put more pressure on Russia so that they would go from pretending to negotiate to actually negotiate. And that's what we are doing, because otherwise, you know, we don't have actually a choice. And supporting Ukraine, of course.
Stoere, a last word on
Well, I mean, because geography matters, you know, the day this war is over and it has to end, I think the Ukrainians will keep fighting because they are not likely to lie down, and we should support them with military means. We should support them with energy. We should support them diplomatically. But the day it ends, it will still be Europe. Yeah. Don't forget. And that is why, you know, how we build the economic development plan. And think about, you know, the generations of Ukrainians who will be affected by this. There are 4.5 million refugees. 100,000 of them in Norway. So, you know, and all of these are European tasks, and it will be big time issues for us to solve. So we have to keep our focus.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister and High Representative Kallas, for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.